I'm ready for our date, Rose. Good evening, folks, and welcome to the Horror Corner. I'm your host, Sean Patrick Erschen, and this week we are taking a look back at a slasher classic from the year 1981, the golden era of slasher films, and that is The Prowler, directed by Joseph Zito, and starring Farley, Granger, Christopher Goutman, and Vicky Dawson as Pam, our final girl. So the film starts off in World War II era. We see some old stock footage, and the film starts with kind of a light tone. You would never think that this was a slasher horror film at first. And then we see this handwritten letter from a girl by the name of Rosemary. Apparently her boyfriend is serving over in the military in World War II. So in the letter, she actually breaks up with her boyfriend, saying that she can't wait for him any longer. The wait for him to come back home has been much longer than anticipated. She doesn't want to put her life on hold anymore. She wants to move on with her life and meet somebody new. And then at the end of the note it says Rosemary with a little drawing of a rose. Hence the reason this name is called Rosemary's Killer. So then we cut to 1945, where the school is throwing a graduation dance. And we meet Rosemary, and she's there with her new boyfriend. And they decide to sketch out back and find this secluded area with a gazebo to go ahead and make out. So as Rosemary's having fun making out with a new boyfriend, she meets Rosemary's killer, dressed in army fatigue from head to toe. He's got his war helmet, his camouflage face mask, and camouflage outfit. It's a really cool look for a slasher killer, I must say. One of the most memorable ones from any standalone slasher film. The killer is not so happy about Rosemary moving on so quick and getting a new boyfriend. So he takes a big pitchfork and stabs right through the boyfriend and then right through Rosemary herself. And it's a really nasty, really gory, drawn-out kill, of course, because Tom Savini does the gore effects for this movie. The legendary Tom Savini, that's right. Who had a big year in 1981 where he also worked on The Burning, and also the previous year he worked on Maniac, another slasher classic, as well as, of course, Dawn of the Dead. And some classic Tom Savini stuff. He does some of his best work in this film, some of the most nasty, brutal, creative kills. So then we cut to 1980, where the local school is throwing another graduation dance 35 years later. And guess who else returns 35 years later? Our killer, dressed in army fatigue. We see him loading up like Rambo at one point with his sword and his knife and his gun and of course his pitchfork. Now why he uses a pitchfork is kind of weird. You think a army veteran would stick with guns and knives and shit, but he's got a pitchfork for some reason. But it is a memorable weapon for a slasher killer. We meet up with Pam, who's in love with this guy who's the local deputy, played by Christopher Goutman. And also we meet the sheriff, who conspicuously leaves to go on a fishing trip right before the events of the film, right before the graduation dance, where the killer strikes again. And we meet this girl, Pam, who's a really nice, likable girl. You can tell right away she's going to be the final girl of the movie, because she's very nice, very likable, definitely like a Laurie Strode type character. And she's partying with her friends, getting ready to go to the dance later on. Her friends are partying, and one girl, you see her in the shower getting ready to go to the dance, and her boyfriend pops in on her and scares her. And she's like, why don't I join you? So he gets ready to join her in the shower, and then right behind him is the killer. And we see the killer take out this huge knife. It actually looks like a short sword, and it goes right through the top of his head, out through his chin. It's nasty, brutal scene. You see like the iris in his eyes go up into his head. It's really nasty, drawn out kill, really brutal and really realistic looking. And then he moves on to the girl in the shower. The killer bashes right through the shower door and puts the pitchfork right into her, right through her stomach. And it's a really drawn out, you can see the pain and anguish in the girl's face. That's why a lot of people call this a mean-spirited slasher, because you see the pain in the girl's face. It's really brutal and nasty. Yeah, so this guy means business. He does not want anyone going to this graduation dance, at least not alive. The killer actually meets up with Pam pretty early on in the film, but she does manage to escape his grasp. So throughout the film, it's implied that certain people could be the killer. It's one of those type of mystery slashers, like the original Friday the 13th. It's pointed out that this guy, the sheriff, might be the killer because, he left town to go on a fishing trip. Maybe he's the killer secretly. And it's pointed out that Rosemary's father could be the killer, because Rosemary's father is an ex-veteran as well. But he's kind of wheelchair bound. Or is he? So it's suspected that the old man could be the killer, but he's kind of a local pervert. He stares at girls through his window in the neighboring apartment. So he's suspected heavily, and various other people are suspected in the movie. You don't know who the actual killer is. But there's also some other brutal kills. Pam's friend Lisa gets killed in the swimming pool. The killer comes up through the bottom of the pool and slashes her throat, and it's quite grisly. And then a teacher goes around looking because she's heard that there's a prowler in the area. And then she gets that sword right through her neck, and it's like, whoosh, comes out the other side, blood splurting everywhere. It's nasty. Yeah, like I said, Tom Savini has some of his best work, some of his most realistic kills. It doesn't look cheesy at all. It looks very realistic. So definitely some of Tom Savini's best work in the film, and that's the main reason to see this film, is the gruesome, nasty kills. Because otherwise, outside the look of the killer, how the killer has a really cool look for a slasher killer, the film isn't very suspenseful. It's very kind of run-of-the-mill slasher. It doesn't have a particularly dark mood that's memorable. It doesn't have a memorable score like a Friday the 13th or Halloween or a Nightmare on Elm Street, and that's probably why this film didn't do as well as those films. It's kind of like the forgotten slasher, It wasn't a huge hit. But definitely it is competently directed by Joseph Zito, who of course went on to do Friday the 13th, The Final Chapter, which Tom Savini also did the gore effects on that film. But it is certainly memorable for the look of the killer, and of course the fact that it's a mystery throughout. You don't know who the actual killer is, and I always like that type of slasher, because you always know in the end it's going to be a real twist and a real shocker. And it is quite an explosive finale, I must say. Pun intended. But at any rate, it's definitely worth a check. So guys, definitely check out The Prowler from 1981, directed by Joseph Zito, and starring Christopher Goutman, Farley, Granger, and Vicky Dawson as Pam. And I must say, the only performance that stands out in the film is Vicky Dawson as the final girl, Pam. Like I said, she's very much like the Laurie Strode type, the virgin, the likable girl, the girl next door, and she plays the part very well. So that's the reasons to see The Prowler. So it is a very memorable slasher from 1981, which had so many great slasher films that came out that year. So it had a lot of competition. But definitely, guys, check out The Prowler from 1981. And thank you for joining me, Sean Patrick Erschen, in the Horror Corner. Tune in and stay scared.